This isn't one of those haunted game stories. At no point are you going to hear me claim something within the game spoke to me, reacted to my words, or forced me to punch myself repeatedly in the face. No, this isn't about a haunted game or a game doing something impossible or even something it shouldn't have. This isn't about a glitch or a hidden satanic message, and at no point did I phone Nintendo headquarters only to have my questions answered with hushed whispers or anguished screams. This story is about a game feature I don't think anyone else has ever unlocked. And that's it. No ghost, no conspiracies, just a secret we were all supposed to find but never did. Something that changes an entire generation's childhood and the very essence of a billion-dollar franchise. This is about what I assume to be a previously undiscovered alternate ending of Super Mario World for the Super Nintendo. In 1996, I received my first computer as a birthday gift. I'd been on the internet before, had used computers before, but it had always been in school or at a friend's house. This one, however, was of mine. All mine. I explored the crude, prehistoric web of the time with great interest. I also pirated media like a madman. Music, games, anything. This was where I first discovered Mario World. I never had a Super Nintendo as a little kid, so it was all new to me. I downloaded tons of games along with the SNES emulator, but Mario World was my favorite one. For over a decade, the same Mario World ROM was my time-wasting hobby. I played it over and over again, beating the game faster and faster until I began lazily to explore the worlds with no particular purpose. Game Genie codes helped me immensely. I could turn off the timer, relive a particular entertaining map for over an hour as I wasted for any download or any number of boring events. It was in this manner that I must have beaten and re-beaten the game thousands upon thousands of times. There was comfort in the obsessive compulsive behavior of this routine, but all that was shattered when I saw the blind Boo. The blind Boo, as I referred it to, was hovering over the exit of the haunted sunken ship level later on in the game. I call it blind because it had no visible eyes. It was like someone had made a lazy ROM hack. But I knew from years upon years of experience this was a normal game. The blind Boo just hung there over the exit pipe, blocking it. I turned my back on it, but it didn't chase me, so how could it, or it didn't even see me. Then I noticed something else of the sorts. There was a key and a keyhole misplaced above the exit. The key and keyholes are such a ways of ending a level in an alternate manner and discovering a secret area. Still, this didn't belong there and I knew it. For a moment I considered the fact that I had actually broken a ROM file from overuse. After taking a screenshot specifically to show all of you Mario Bros fans out there, I picked up the key and opened the door, figuring the game would seize up and I'd have to restart. Instead, it opened up a new path on the map selection screen. A whirlpool next to Bowser's already creepy head cave thing. I pressed the right arrow and moved onto the swirling drain. Oh god, no. This didn't really strike me as odd because if you're familiar with the Mario World game, there's an area called Star Road that you may know has similar names. Just stuff like tubular and awesome and all manner of dumb words and phrases. Most of the areas were called Vanilla Forest 1 and Donut Mountains 3 and all that, but there were maps with odd names like that. But what did concern me though was Mario's expression. Was it surprise, shock, fear? Anyways, I entered the map, and oddly enough, the whirlpool in the middle of a lake began with the standard castle entry animation. Mario walked up to a castle door, looked up, and then went in. I could tell it was underwater though because of the bubbles that periodically emerged from the sprite's mouth and floated to the top of the screen. Inside the castle, it started to look more and more like I was in fact experiencing a glitch. There was no room to jump, no room to do anything but run left and right. I must have gone right for 10 or 20 minutes just holding the B button and running along at full speed. After a while, I ran into 1 or 2 blind Boos in the darkness above. Then 3, then 4, and then the whole screen was full of them. They kinda just hung there doing nothing. They wouldn't chase me if I turned my back, as if with the previous blind boo. If I made any noise like Mario's jump sound, they would just kind of shudder a bit, like they heard the sound of Mario's movements but couldn't do anything about it. Then something made me stop and turn the other way. Now, I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that this map was designed to specifically screw with the player, not because of the giant bleeding bill, but because it was inescapable. There was literally no way to avoid being killed by it, as you can clearly see above. That is, unless you're like me and you have the Game Genie cheats on hand. I switch on the code for permanent invincibility. I let the bleeding bill chase me for a while when I was invincible, just to get a good look at the thing. I stopped and killed it with my invulnerable touch, only when I saw a message that hadn't been there when I passed before. I hate you. That kind of creeped me out, but on the other hand, it was kind of interesting because it meant this was definitely a map that was supposed to exist. There was some sort of plot element here, something undiscovered. What did it mean? Who hated me? King Koopa seemed the obvious answer, or maybe just the ghost? When you're in a haunted castle that you found by way of a haunted ship, a bloody looking hate message isn't so unbelievable. I saw it again as I approached some giant boos. I was thankful that the blind boos ended at this point, because the more I watched them shudder, the uneasier I felt, almost empathetic towards them. The thankfulness ended when I turned my back on the giant boos and this happened. Giant boos with faces I hadn't seen before. They looked mad at being awakened, angry that you were invading their haunted houses across the Mario World island. This was different. They looked gleeful, demented. I could see right down their throats, which seemed odd given the lack of detail in their mouths, usually displayed. And yes, of course, I'm going to address that message you saw in the picture. Why won't you die? I don't know why. Am I supposed to? Who's asking? I let the giant boos touch me and they died like the bleeding bills, of which I had encountered too. Despite any attempt to scare the player, I knew that being invincible meant invincible, no matter what they threw at me. After a while running down this strange claustrophobic corridor with no more eventful happenings, I came to a room with an exit pipe. Taking the pipe downward, I came out the other end and dropped into a room filled with water. The water made sense, as was a sunken castle beneath a whirlpool after all. I was rewarded for my troubles with a question mark block that released a mushroom for me. I could have easily done this with a cheat code, but the thought had escaped me as I faced all these strange and new sights. The first creatures I encountered in the underwater portion of the castle were thwomps. Now, unless you've been living under a rock since the mid-80s, you know thwomps are stone-like square creatures that hang from the ceiling and fall wherever you come near. And they try to crush you, essentially. Well, these thwomps lined up in a tight row dropped repeatedly and randomly with no real trigger or any sense of logic. They would just wait or drop whenever they seemed to feel like it. It also looked like these thwomps had been very successful thwomps. More cartoony blood. This was getting pretty unusual for the Mario Bros. Franchise, which I hadn't recalled seeing blood in any of the games before and after this one. Now, I seen it used 3 times, the bloody bills, the message, and these perpendicular smashing grinding thwomps who were working their victims, into pulp forever. In the hampering effects of the water, I walked slowly under these things, making sure every single one touched me and died. There were almost 30 of them in a row. The sight of them mindlessly crushing over and over just made me hate them with an unsettling intensity. What's weird is that the blood caused Mario to slide as if he were on an ice level. After walking through the gauntlet of depravity, I swarmed into a more open area that was filled with spikes on the floor and ceiling. It was difficult to swim in the manner without touching the spikes, but since I was still invincible, I didn't think much of it. I avoided them more for fun than any sense I'd be damaged. It stopped being fun really fast, so... Now, I knew somewhat of what was going on. The bloody mess of thwomps were unendingly splattered. It was other Marios, past Marios that had tried to traverse this level and failed. I hate to admit it, this was an excellent touch, even if it was a bit ghoulish. Whoever had designed the map actually broke the fourth wall and showed you the bloated, motionless abortions of the player's own careless treatment of Mario's tiny little life. The bodies only floated straight up and down in a tiny bit, as if to show the effects of a light current. It was genius, and I couldn't believe I might be the first and only person to ever see this. I toyed with the idea of taking more than one screenshot I presented to you, basically so all of you reading this could enjoy the secret map as much as I could, especially this weird little touch, but without swimming, without kicking or moving in any way, the dead Mario started coming at me like torpedoes. Their faces remained blank and blue and dead, but they moved with astounding speed. They angled in position and worked all sorts of unique trajectories that left me almost nowhere to run. They continued coming at me and swarming and backing up to try again, and I just couldn't bring myself to let them touch me. I moved with more speed and skill than I had ever exerted, frantically trying to keep Mario free of the drowning victims that seemed dead set on rocketeering straight into him. When I finally reached the purple exit pipe you see above, there had been 10 of those things right behind me, pitching and turning and chasing me. I entered the pipe as fast as I could, thankfully that it worked properly and had Mario out of that situation in a heartbeat. The corridor that followed was empty, thankfully. It was just a blue underwater hallway of sorts with nothing to avoid or kill. It was boring and predictable like the game had been all these years, which brought back a sense of safety. At the end of the hallway, I came to the standard pair of doors you'd enter to face a final boss. Going through the door was, as you expected, the typical change of map views occurred and Mario was standing on a obticulous bridge over boiling lava. Or had it been blood all along? When Mario walked onto the bridge, however, there was no boss creature. Instead, Mario immediately looked to the side and froze. I couldn't control him anymore and he just stood there. Keep looking until you see it. I didn't see it at first, so I don't expect you to notice it right away, but if you still haven't spotted the thing, look in the third window from the left. That's usually not there. Mario seemed to regain his composure and looked back and forth slowly, surveying the room. There was still no boss and I still couldn't control him, so I stopped trying and just watched. This went on for what seemed like forever. Nothing happened. Then a familiar face walked in from the right, dressed in green, tall, and angry. It was Luigi. Mario recoiled in horror. It's difficult to say that without thinking how crazy it sounds, but Mario really reeled back with a sort of terror that was uncharacteristic for such a peppy, happy-go-lucky mascot like him. Then Luigi spoke. It was all connecting now. The messages scrawled on the walls, "I hate you, why won't you die?" It was all Luigi. He's always been in Mario's shadow. The player too, the one who doesn't get the princess in these early games. No matter how identical he is to Mario in skill set, or ability, or sometimes even surpassing him, at the end of the day, the game is Super Mario Brothers. And that's just it, he's just the brother. How he must have hated Mario, who among us wouldn't. Think about it, no matter what happens, Mario always comes back. No matter how many corpses he leaves littering the battlefield, he's always there once more to leap and cheer and get all the adoration, and Koopa hadn't worked alone. I don't know what that meant at first, if anything, but again, you just have to think it though. How exactly does King Koopa consistently succeed in kidnapping the princess? From day one, from the original Mario Brothers and onward, it had always been an inside job. Still unable to control the character, I watched Mario simply cower in fear as Luigi leapt high into the air, as high as he could, and Mario too. He jumped on Mario while he was weeping, again and again. I was powerless to stop it, and when he was done, he seemed to look at Mario's limp body with this overwhelming rage. Then the bridge started to disappear. Soon, Mario would be dead as I looked on. I had an irrational thought. Would it be permanent? Would the game be unplayable? Will Luigi replace him? I had to keep watching. Within an instant, as Luigi turned to seemingly strike a victory pose like he had beaten the level, Mario awkwardly got to his feet and took him by the surprise. Fear, sadness, and confusion had given way to anger. Mario overpowered his brother with little effort, and to this day I'm still haunted by the final result of his wrathful reprisal. This was the map's title. None of it was a glitch, none of it was a mistake. It wasn't a developer getting back at Nintendo, it wasn't some ghost haunting a Nintendo cart. It was a planned and purposeful part of the Mario Brothers mythos. If you beat the same level X number of times, A secret part of the world opened, and you learned that from playing through Mario Brothers all the way through Mario Land. Luigi had secretly been working against you and was in fact facilitating the repeat abduction and abuse of the princess. But why? Money? Power? No, it was all there from the beginning. It's because he couldn't take any longer from living in Mario's shadow, not being Mario himself. After Luigi died, and well, truly died, Mario just sat on the edge of the bridge and wept. I was forced to watch this for minutes on end before the screen faded to black. I played the rest of the game through to see if anything changed, but nothing else odd happened, as one would expect since this whole ordeal was just supposed to be part of the actual full story. I couldn't access the whirlpool again. I'd seen the events once, and that was all I apparently was allowed. It was back to the game as usual, the same exact game I'd played since the 90s, and would probably continue to play for the rest of my days. Well, it was the same except for the final image. And that is our first Mario Creepypasta, so let's talk about it. So first off, something I want to get off right off the bat is that this story is actually classified as a troll/bad creepypasta, which is actually kind of surprising considering there's a lot of good stuff in the story that I personally like. Now, that's not to say it's perfect. God, no. There are definitely some things in this story that definitely could have been improved upon or could have been removed. There's definitely a lot of stuff of that. However, mainly the good stuff outweighs the bad in my opinion, and this story I think is definitely one of the more better gaming creepypastas out there. First off, something I want to talk about in terms of bad is the phrasing and some sentencing in this story. It's bad at times. At times it's good, but there are really some bad moments. The author, I don't know why he used a lot of descriptive words in very unnecessary parts. It really takes you out of the story, and it's honestly, harder for me and really readers in general to do a proper narration just because of how many unnecessary descriptive words are there. It's good to include one, but you don't need to include like 30 of them in the same sentence. It's very unnecessary and distracting, like I said. Another thing was, while I was reading the story, there were two key things, or not really key things, but two things I needed to cut out. When the character was talking about him getting his first laptop, he mentioned him downloading pornography and then printing it out. I'm sorry, but that's not useful. It takes you out of the story, it makes you kind of laugh, and I get that. I think the author was trying to go for a much more, humorous type of angle, but it really just ruined the story, especially in the beginning part where you're trying to build atmosphere. And then towards the end part, or the middle part, before our main character faces off with Luigi, in the castle part, there is a mushroom, which, you've probably seen the screenshots, but the mushroom looks weird, and honestly, the author could have said, the mushroom looks weird, not touching that, or he probably shouldn't include that in the story. I'm sorry, but that part was unnecessary. He didn't even use it, so there was no point in including it in the story, and it kind of seems odd compared to the other stuff in this story, which actually I'll get into that right now. First off, I want to talk about the screenshots that come with the story. They look fantastic. The art in them blend in perfectly with the whole style of Super Mario World, and it adds this whole sort of realism to it. Not one point, besides the whole mushroom thing, do they ever stand out. They look perfectly aligned, something that you would see in an SNES game, or even a Super Mario World game for that matter. And I do gotta love the story for going the extra mile and including that. Ever rarely do we get gaming creepypastas where they include some decent screenshots, and this does a pretty good job. Now, another thing that I like is that it gets rid of all the crazy generic creepypastas, mainly in the gaming side, where it's a haunted cartridge or it's a lost cartridge or this and that. No, it strictly plays into that. It's a secret level and it stays with it throughout the game. It doesn't try to do anything beyond, and there was never really a point in the story where the game was speaking to the author. It was talking to Mario directly, the player, like as if it was part of the story. And I like that aspect where it plays into the conspiracy that this was a lost level, or a secret ending, I should say. And honestly, this does kind of keep up with old school Nintendo games, or mainly just games in that era, where if you're good enough at the game, you're able to unlock secrets, if you're good, faster and faster. And I like that whole idea where if you're good at something and you keep playing it over a certain amount of times, something new will happen. There are definitely some games that do that reward you being good at the game, and I do like how it plays into that. My last thing is, I like how the author sort of reacts. He doesn't seem dramatic, he isn't also dumb about it. He pretty much stays grounded, and I like it. I like how the character doesn't stay, over the top like Tom did in Sonic.exe, but he's also not dumb from the Tales of Creepypasta. He's no main character from, Ben Drown, but he comes, he's a good decent protagonist, and I do like this main character in this story. Anyways, with that being said, those are my thoughts on the story. Don't forget to check out my other social medias. It will be linked in the description below along with the original story. And with that being said, I am out.